A female blogger, an American woman pregnant with 2 lovely daughters, suddenly vanished overnight. As the clues slowly unfolded, everyone realized this case was even more terrifying than the Hangzhou incident. When police found the bodies, the children had been forced through a narrow hole. Even the judge at the trial exclaimed,
"This is perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime that I have handled out of the thousands of cases that I have seen."
Question in mind, I searched through many records. It turned out this was not the first time in the U.S. The story began in August 2018 in a small town, a peaceful town in Colorado, with good security, a place many middle-class American families dreamed of living. Chris's family of 5 also lived there. The couple had been married for 8 years. His wife Shannon often live-streamed on Facebook, sharing her daily life, teaching kids crafts, makeup, and exercise. She even recorded her struggles during early pregnancy. It was clear Shannon was optimistic and full of life. In contrast, Chris was the opposite. He was a technician at an oil company, introverted and quiet by nature. His job was tough. He worked from 5:30 a.m. until late at night, yet Shannon often praised him online, saying he was a wonderful husband and father. Chris not only did housework, but also cared for the kids, bathing and playing with them. A model man in one of her live streams, Shannon once shared that both had gone through failed marriages before. She herself had been in a serious car accident and was abandoned by her ex-husband due to lupus. It was during that hardship that Chris, whom she called Destiny, appeared. His companionship and support helped her regain faith in life. They eventually married, welcoming their first daughter Bella, then their second daughter Celeste. Having 2 daughters, they longed for a baby boy. In June 2018, Shannon was pregnant again, and the ultrasound confirmed it was a boy. The joy was so great she recorded a special video. To capture the moment, she told her husband,
"We did it again." I like that shirt. Really?
Really?
That's awesome. So pink means...
That's just a test.
I know. It just says the pink is going to be girls.
I don't know. Just a test.
That's awesome. Guess when you want to, it happens.
Indeed, their long-awaited wish had finally come true. In the video, Shannon looked into the camera and said, "You're going to be a dad." Chris stood on the stairs with a bright smile. Viewers online felt happy for them, believing the family would finally have the son they wished for. But a psychologist had another perspective. He said that smile wasn't from happiness, but from the expression it showed. It was a sign of hidden pressure. And from here, everything began to change. Early morning of August 13, 2018, Shannon returned from a work trip in Arizona. Strangely, Chris didn't pick her up. Her close friend drove her home. Because of nausea and fatigue, Shannon's condition was poor. Before parting, her friend reminded her, "Rest early once you get home. Don't stay up working late. If anything happens, call me anytime." No one expected those words would be their last farewell. The next morning, as usual, her friend waited for Shannon to text. But even by noon, there was no response. She began to feel uneasy, because Shannon was always responsible. No matter how unwell, she called Shannon, but the phone rang endlessly with no answer. Anxious, she decided to drive with her son to Shannon's house in this safe town. Usually when Chris left for work in the morning, the door was left ajar, not locked. But this time it was tightly locked. The curtains were drawn, the house eerily silent. She called out loudly but got no response. Peering through the window, the living room was neat, no signs of disorder. Her instincts told her something was wrong, so she called Chris. He answered and said, "I left for work at 5 a.m. When I left, Shannon was still asleep. Maybe she woke up and went to a friend's place. Don't worry, she's an adult, it's fine." But her friend was still uneasy and urged him to come back and check. What if Shannon was home alone and something happened? After hanging up with Chris, she wasted no time and called the police. Around 1:40 p.m., a police officer arrived at the scene. At that moment, Chris also returned and seemed very cooperative. He opened the door and invited the officer and friend inside. The officer began checking each room. The house was clean and tidy. But in the master bedroom, they found something unusual. On the bed, there was no wallet, phone, or ID. Shanann's keys and makeup bag were still at home. Even her work orders were left on the desk, unfinished. Everything suggested she hadn't planned to go out. Seeing this, the officer asked about their marriage. Chris replied, "Lately we've had a few minor conflicts. Maybe Shanann took the kids somewhere to talk with someone." But the officer firmly stated, no mother would take her kids but leave her phone at home, especially not a pregnant woman feeling unwell, leaving without preparation. Then the police asked the neighbors and pulled footage from a security camera across the garage. The recording showed that at 5:27 a.m., Chris backed his pickup truck into the garage. For about 18 minutes, he went back and forth between the house and truck, likely moving items. At 5:45, he drove away. But throughout the footage, until people entered the house that afternoon, Shanann and the two children were never seen. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Where did they go? On the third day after his family disappeared, the media approached Chris for an interview. Before the camera, he looked exhausted and said, "If someone took them, I just beg you to let them go. I just want them back safe. This home cannot be without them." After the interview aired, many viewers saw a man with empty eyes. His calm voice evoked sympathy. Chris also said, "Every day when I get home, I hope the kids run to hug me tight. I can't imagine where they are now. Are they still safe? Are they being fed properly?" But just as the public felt sympathy, the police noticed something odd. Chris's eyes always avoided contact. He barely looked straight at reporters or investigators. FBI behavioral analysts, after watching the interview, gave an initial assessment. They believed Chris's emotions didn't match reality. He didn't seem like a worried husband, but like someone acting worried. Shanann's close friend also began to doubt. She said Chris seemed distressed, but remembered on the day it happened. During their call, Chris had clearly said, "No need to call the police. Maybe Shanann just went out." When reviewing the security footage, Chris, usually calm, now appeared restless, arms crossed tightly, pacing back and forth inside. He even urged the police to wrap up the check. The neighbor, after watching the footage, also spoke up. He said he had never seen Chris wake up that early to back into the garage. Nor had he seen him load items onto the truck like that when handing the footage to police. The neighbor even told Chris a cryptic remark. "The light looks so different today." Hearing this, Chris stayed silent for a few seconds. After these suspicious signs, the police began investigating their marriage more deeply, checking Shanann's phone. They found shocking messages. In early August, Shanann often told her best friend that Chris was growing colder, even ignoring her morning sickness. She suspected Chris didn't want the baby. Worse, in July when she visited her mother, Chris made excuses not to go with her. He only showed up when Shanann was about to return. After that, Chris stayed distant, even deliberately keeping away from his daughters. Shanann's mother also told police that Chris once treated his wife like a treasure, but this time he had completely changed. Even when Shanann was sick all night, Chris didn't ask once, "Are you okay?" All of this was the complete opposite of the loving husband image Chris showed in public. On August 15, 2018, 3 days after the incident, the police brought Chris in for questioning. Before starting, the FBI agent running the polygraph gently said, "I just want to help you find them, but you have to cooperate with us." Only then did Chris nod in agreement. At that moment, he sat on the chair, legs crossed, arms folded across his chest, still showing the face of a victim, and agreed to take the polygraph test. After adjusting the device, the officer began asking questions. "Do you know where your wife and children are?" Chris answered, "No." "Do you have anything to do with their disappearance?" Chris answered no. "Have you ever had conflicts with your wife?" Chris answered no. Throughout the interrogation, Chris's tone was calm, his facial control steady. Even when asked if he killed them, he barely changed expression. But Chris underestimated the polygraph. This was not something you could fool just by keeping a calm face. The result came out at -18 points. He clearly failed, showing serious deceptive reactions. The FBI agent slid the result in front of Chris, still speaking gently. "Chris, you've lied to all of us. Now is your chance to choose to tell the truth. I know you're a good man. You're not the kind who would do something evil, right? You just lost control. I can understand your emotions at that moment. Maybe Shanann did something that angered you. We just want to know what really happened. We're not here to arrest you after hearing this." Chris finally lifted his head to the agent and said, "She strangled my children." Beyond that, he refused to admit anything else. Afterward, Chris told the police he wanted to speak privately with his father. The police agreed to let his father in. In the footage it showed, Chris lowered his head and told his father. That morning, when he woke up, he told Shannon he wanted a separation. Hearing that, Shannon broke down and they fought fiercely. As he was about to leave, he suddenly heard his children crying. He went back to the bedroom. Chris said he saw Shannon strangling them. In a fit of rage, he strangled his wife. Then he loaded his wife and 2 children into his pickup truck and drove to the oil field. His father sat in silence for 10 seconds, holding his son's hand, helplessly saying, "Oh God." It was beyond his imagination. His daughter-in-law killing his 2 granddaughters, and his son becoming a murderer because of it. At that moment, he could only remain silent. Then the FBI psychological analyst entered. He approached Chris, reassuring him while asking softly, "Where did you bury them? You don't want them to have no grave marker, right? Please tell me. No matter what, let them rest with dignity." He then produced a map, and Chris pointed to where he left the bodies. August 16th, 2018. Police, following Chris's directions, went to an oil field in Colorado, a site of the oil company he worked for. The site was remote, about 40 miles from his house. Desolate, overgrown with weeds, with only a few oil tanks and a dirt road, rarely used. Chris confessed he had left his wife and children there, but even the seasoned FBI agents did not expect the shocking sight awaiting them, both visually and mentally. First, police used a drone to scan low over the site. They quickly spotted a patch of freshly dug soil. On top of it was a bed sheet and a suspicious black plastic bag lying in the barren land. The forensic team was immediately called to exhume and collect evidence. The autopsy report was horrifying, so it can only be summarized here. Shannon's cause of death was mechanical asphyxia, hyoid fracture, with multiple neck injuries, and inside her lip, a 1.5-inch tear, likely from being smothered. The fetus, around 15 to 16 weeks, died along with her. Bella, 4 years old, died of asphyxiation, with red scratch marks on her hip, dirt and oil in her mouth. Chris's skin cells found under her nails. Celeste, 3 years old, died of asphyxiation, her body stuffed into an oil tank, the tank opening only 9 inches wide, with clear abrasions on her head and oil in her lungs. Forensic experts confirmed the child couldn't be put in normally. There was only one possibility. Even they exclaimed, there was only one possibility. Even the forensic expert exclaimed, this was not something a human being could do, let alone to his own children. The chief medical examiner also reported, Chris didn't lose control in a fit of rage, but coldly calculated each step, from strangling, to wrapping in the bed sheet, to driving to the remote oil site, and choosing the oil tank to hide his daughter's body. Every action of Chris looked like part of a plan executed, with chilling coldness. The oil tank was chosen not only for concealment, but because the place was rarely monitored, very unlikely to be discovered. Police then used satellite data to track Chris's phone and truck, reconstructing his entire route that morning. At 5:27 a.m., Chris backed the truck into the garage and began loading items. 5:45 a.m., left the house. 6:35 a.m. From 6:45 to 7:15, he hid the bodies. Then at 7:30 clocked in for work. At 8 o'clock, continued working as if nothing had happened. He showed no panic, no plea for help, no sign of impulsive action. Even after hiding the bodies, Chris still replied to work emails and arranged tasks as usual. Meanwhile, friends and family, especially her best friend, were searching everywhere for Shannon. Clearly, Chris had deceived the police. There was no truth in Shannon killing her daughters. It was him who killed his wife, and all 3 died by his hands. People often say even a beast doesn't eat its young. So why did... To clarify, police dug deeper into his personal life. First, checking Shannon's phone, they found that since spring 2018, in her Instagram clips, Chris's presence gradually faded. Shannon often confided to her best friend at midnight, complaining that Chris was growing colder, deliberately avoiding her. She said before, when she was sick, Chris would rub her back, but now he didn't even ask a question. Shannon began to wonder if she was getting old or unattractive, making her husband despise her, or if Chris simply stopped loving her. Though she confided this to friends, in her heart she still thought this was just a rough patch in marriage, because before, they had overcome many hardships together, so this shouldn't be too much. She pushed aside her feelings, focusing on work, business trips, caring for 2 kids, and managing the family's finances. But in reality, their financial situation was deteriorating. The couple's annual income was about $90,000, outwardly stable, but under the burden of a big mortgage, car loans, and credit card debt. Their finances had long been in deficit. In fact, in June 2015, they had filed for bankruptcy protection. To improve the situation, Shannon sought extra work and began selling weight loss products. Thanks to this side job, the family's finances eased somewhat, but from there things began to spiral out of control. In the summer of 2018, while staying at Chris's mother's house, due to his grandmother's carelessness, the 2 girls suffered food allergies. After finding out the details, Shannon argued fiercely with her mother-in-law and was kicked out of the house. Angrily, Shannon took the kids to her parents' home. While Shannon was away, Chris found himself with freedom. Soon after, police traced his contacts and investigated his call logs and search history. They discovered that during her absence, Chris was frequently in touch with a woman named Nicole Kessinger, a co-worker at the oil company. From the start, Chris lied to Nicole that he was divorced. On July 4th, he even invited her to his house. Soon after, they became intimate in the bedroom, then went on trips, taking many photos together. Clearly at that time Chris was having an affair, but if that was the motive for murder, it seemed unconvincing, because if he truly wanted to leave his family, he could have chosen divorce. There was no need to cruelly kill his wife and children. So this explanation was not convincing enough. Strangely, even when imprisoned, Chris never revealed the real reason why he killed Shannon and the 2 children. When people thought this case would forever remain a mystery, no one expected that a year later, a book would suddenly spark debate. In September 2019, a book titled The Tragic Confessions of the Family Map. The author was Sherilyn Cadle, a writer in Colorado. At first, she only wrote to Chris in prison out of curiosity, but unexpectedly Chris not only replied, but in the following months, he sent her more than 10 letters. What was revealed in those letters shocked everyone. Chris wrote that on that morning, he never intended to talk about separation with Shannon. He woke up earlier than usual and went initially planning to strangle them while they were asleep. But unexpectedly they woke up. Why he stopped then Chris did not explain. After that he went back to the master bedroom and argued with Shannon. She questioned why he had changed, if he was cheating. Chris didn't answer but jumped on her, pressing her down on the bed, his hands gripping her neck. Shannon struggled violently, her mouth open but unable to make a sound. In Shannon's eyes, Chris clearly felt she was asking why he was doing this. When she went limp he let go. Shannon was dead. Chris dragged her body off the bed, wrapped it in a bedsheet, and placed it in the truck. Turning around, he saw his 2 daughters quietly watching, not crying or screaming, just staring as their father wrapped their mother in a sheet. Chris told them, "Mommy is sick. We have to go to the hospital." Then he put Bella and Celeste into their child's seats in the back. So the 3 of them, with Shannon's body, drove together for more than an hour to the oil site. Arriving there, Chris, "Daddy, are you going to do the same to me?" In the letters, Chris also wrote that when Shannon was first pregnant, he once thought of giving her pills to cause a miscarriage, but never carried it out. He admitted he never wanted the 3rd child. He just wanted to start over. And behind it all was the name Nicole Kessinger. Earlier, Chris had lied to Nikki that he was divorced. To cover that lie, he chose to erase everything tied to his past. He didn't want the woman he loved to find out the truth. He wanted to keep the image of a good man in her eyes. Because of that, Chris chose to kill his family and run away with Nicole. In November 2018, Chris was sentenced to 5 life terms. Shortly after entering prison, he began receiving letters from strangers. One woman wrote, "I know you probably won't reply, but I just want to say you're not a monster." A few days later, he received another letter with a photo of a woman in a swimsuit, with a note on the back. "I believe you are a gentle, kind Chris, not the man portrayed in the news." More and more letters kept coming, sometimes arriving in large batches. Some wrote diaries, some drew pictures, some shared their broken families, some even directly proposed marriage. Statistics showed that in just the first 3 months, Chris received over 60 letters, 1/3 from admirers. I truly cannot understand why anyone would fall in love with a murderer. To find out, I researched many documents, and it turns out Chris was not the first to become infamous. Before him in the US, there was Scott, who killed his wife and child, dumping them into the sea. After being imprisoned, he too received countless pursuits from women, even the notorious ones. The Night Stalker Richard even married a woman while on death row. In psychiatry, this phenomenon is called hybristophilia. They don't truly love the criminal act, but are obsessed with the strong control and power, along with the illusion they can change him, thus creating a sick affection romanticized. In the book, The Tragic Confessions of the Family Massacre, the author revealed Chris didn't reply to all letters. He only responded to those women who wrote gently and didn't mention the case. He admitted being surprised to receive them, but also found it unbelievable that someone was willing to understand him. In one letter he wrote, "I once did the unimaginable, yet there are still people who don't care about my past. I don't know if they're too naive, or if God is playing a joke on me." Because of this, Chris became a name of great attention in prison. The prison later had to set up a male review unit to ensure no violations in the content. Ironically, even after life sentences, Chris continued to be mentioned thanks to love letters, psychological revelations, and analysis shows. In the end, he even became a familiar figure on Discovery Channel. On September 30th, 2020, Netflix released the documentary American Murder: The Family Next Door, reconstructing the entire case with Shanann's Facebook, police body cams, press conferences, and courtroom surveillance footage. Shanann's father tearfully said, "My daughter loved Chris with all her heart. I thought Chris would love her the same way, but never expected this ending." While Chris's mother calmly stated, "We have all forgiven you, son, so don't carry too much guilt." At this, many netizens were outraged. Who exactly was she representing?
We love you. And we forgive you, son.
But when I look at the two children, the little girls who adored their father so much, I cannot accept such a distorted worldview.
My daddy is a hero. He helps me grow up strong. He reads me books, ties my shoes. You're a hero. Blue and blue.
That's all for today's video. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for uncovering cases, so you won't miss the next analysis of the world's most shocking cases. See you in the next video.